Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at www.maryenglish.com, maryenglish.co.uk, and UK Astrologer. Hello, how are you? Now this week I want to talk about an important subject. I have covered it once before, but in a different context. And if you're feeling a little fragile, it's probably best not to listen, because in this episode I'm going to be talking about suicide, which I also covered in episode 234. Now you could be quite justified in asking, why am I covering this again? And the reason is that the statistics for people ending their lives in the UK has risen. I've put some links in the show notes if you want to check this yourself, but in the year 2024 there were 7,147 deaths registered in the UK where the cause was recorded as suicide. It was at a much higher level in 1981, went down till about 2009, rose to about 2013, dropped to 2017, and has been going up again. The age standardised suicide rate among women was almost halved since 1981, 10.5 deaths to 5.7 deaths per 100,000 people. By comparison, the rate among men has fallen by just 8% from 19.2 to 17.6 deaths per 100,000 people. But the levels basically for men are rising, and for women. So you're going to now ask the question, Mary, what has that got to do with astrology? So this episode is because you are going to be, if you're going to be an astrologer, you need to be aware of what someone will be going through when they talk about suicide. And what prompted me to do this episode this week, I was reading an article in a newspaper that will be remain anonymous, and there was a sort of like a letters page, and a lady in her 80s had written in saying that she'd got a friend who was in her 90s, and the friend was incapacitated, couldn't move, was kept in the home, couldn't get out, was feeling very down. She had some children, but had spoken to this 80-year-old lady and said that she had enough tablets in her house and was told not to take more than the prescribed amount because they would kill her. And she said that she felt better knowing that she had these tablets and would use them at some point, and asked this 83-year-old lady not to reveal anything to anybody. And the person that was writing the reply in the newspaper said, well, you've got a confidence with this person, don't say anything to their children. Honestly, I can say that that's completely the wrong information. They had a link at the bottom, contact Samaritans, etc. So we are going to use a live chart today. This is an anonymous person whose details were shared online and via the inquest that happened. So we have an accurate date of birth, no time. We've got a date of birth. We have the date and time that this person killed themselves. And I'll share some information about it, because I will also put a link to Papyrus and to what they're called Living Works, and there is a form of training called ASSIST, ASIST, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, which I have had, and it was a 2-day course that I did. Somehow or other I got funded by the council, I can't remember why. Oh yes, because I'm an alternative therapist and I'd asked for it. Because of, if you go back to episode 234, that was the reason that I had the training. And I'm quite aware now, and I do work with clients, and I had a client recently who once again said to me that her life was so bad, she felt so bad, she'd contemplated suicide, she wanted to join somebody who had also passed over. And we had a discussion about it. And the best thing to do if someone says that they're feeling suicidal is to actually ask them, if you were to kill yourself, what method would you use? Because people that have thought about it and spoken about it enough will have contemplated how they're going to do it. And the first thing you need to do is how to make them safe. So you don't talk about tomorrow, you can listen to what happened to them about yesterday. But in that example in the online newspaper that I read, where the lady had said she had enough of these tablets to kill herself, then the inverted commas accepted thing to do would be to remove those tablets. So what you do to help the person be safe, and what you're aiming for, assisting life. So there's in the assist training, there's a thing called pathway for assisting life. You're not focusing on endlessly about how they're going to kill themselves, because they will stay in that place. What you're doing is making a pathway for the person to assist them to continue life. And you're not talking about tomorrow, you're talking about how can we help you be safe for today. Because people that are suicidal, if they don't actually kill themselves, are more likely to continue to live once they come out of the bad place that they're in. And in my professional practice, I've worked with numbers of clients. One of my really earliest patients when I was a homeopath was a lady who both of her sons had committed suicide. Not one child, but both of them. And what can happen in a family that's very upset, suicide can get a little bit sort of like the flu. People will catch it. People make pacts with each other. Because one person has died, another person in the family will feel so bad about it and so unhappy about the circumstances that they start to contemplate it themselves, and it becomes sort of catching, sort of like the flu in a sense. And if we're looking at it energetically, the more you talk about something with other people, the more you're bringing it into reality with your mind. Now, I'm not saying that things shouldn't be spoken about, because they need to be. But what needs to happen with somebody who's feeling that bad, it isn't necessarily that they want to kill themselves. They want whatever their suffering is, they want their suffering to end. So the conversation needs to be about the suffering, not tons of questioning about how you're going to kill yourself. But you need to find that out, because people, there's umpteen methods that people will use to kill themselves: hanging, shooting, drugs, jumping in front of trains, you name it. The client that I had, one boy hung himself with a leather belt at home in his bedroom, and his mother found him, and the other boy crashed a car. That was the first boy that died. So these are difficult things to even listen to. And if anybody in your private practice says this to you, which, trust me, if you're in practice for more than 5 minutes, you'll come across someone. 1 in 4 people in the UK have thoughts about suicide. That's 1 in 4. That's 25% of the UK population will consider suicide. They might not do it. And so going back to a recent client who was talking about it, she kept saying she wouldn't do it. But you don't know how people are going to feel when they've not eaten for a while, or they've had too much to drink, or it's a dark night and they're on their own and they haven't seen anybody for a while. And it's very, very sad for the people that are left behind. And it's very, very sad. Now, the person's chart that we're using, The only reason I'm showing their chart is because their information was shared online. So this isn't something that is secret. I don't want to identify them, and I haven't used the correct location of birth, and also I don't know what time they were born, but they were born on the 2nd of February 2004. I'm using the whole sign method, and I'm using 6 a.m. as the default time that I use if I don't know somebody's time of birth. And the 2nd of February 2004. So this is somebody that was recently born. And I was looking on Astro.com using the search tool, and I didn't really feel at all connected to any of the data that was on there. There's umpteen listings of people that have attempted suicide or managed it, and inverted commas, unfortunately, all the suicide charts on Astro.com only give the people's dates of birth. It doesn't give the date or the time that they died, because in astrology these are the things that we're interested in. If you do astrology for any length of time, you're constantly asking about the time that something happened, because in your mind you want to well, I don't know if you do it, but I do it, and I'm not making that sort of laughter voice because I find it funny, apologies, but I do that. I constantly inquire about the times that things happen, because I want to construct the chart in my mind to understand what was the motivating forces behind whatever might have happened. So this person is a Sun in Aquarius, Moon in Gemini, Mercury in Capricorn, Venus in Pisces, Mars in Aries, Jupiter in Virgo, Saturn Cancer, Uranus Pisces, Neptune Aquarius, Pluto Sagittarius. Chiron is 21 degrees Capricorn. Now, there are no aspects between the sun and the moon, but I don't know what time the birth was, but the sun is in air and the moon is in air, and a person with moon in Gemini is going to always want to talk about how they feel. This particular person got a diagnosis of ADHD when they were 10. Soon after they were born, their parents separated and they lived with their mother, and their mother was disabled in some way, and eventually the child went to live with the father and the stepmother. So this is a child that grew up in one segment of the family and then went and lived with the other segment of the family, and spent a long amount of time, according to the mother and the health experts, etc., that were mentioned in the inquest, that they were quite frustrated and unhappy about quite a lot of things. So with this chart, the reason I want to share it is the chart is inverted commas interesting astrologically, and I don't mean interesting. I'm always a bit shy about using the word interesting because it makes it sound as if I'm some sort of voyeur, which I'm not, but I'd say astrologically interesting. The sun is 12 degrees Aquarius 43 minutes, and Neptune is 12 degrees Aquarius and 51 minutes. So Neptune's just that little bit past the sun sign. So this is someone with an enormous imagination. When the sun and Neptune are conjunct, imagination is the key. But their Mercury is in Capricorn, so their Mercury is in an earth sign and it's operating slower, much slower than the sun, and in fact slower than the moon. So the moon's speeding about the place because it's an air sign, and the sun's speeding about because that's an air sign as well. And Chiron is exactly conjunct the Mercury. So even though this is a reasonably optimistic sun sign to have, persons with Mercury in Capricorn, their thinking processes are more serious and more pragmatic and down to earth. And with Chiron being exactly conjunct, as it's less than a degree apart, so Chiron's 21 degrees 29 seconds and Mercury's 22:46. Chiron is the wounded healer and stuff, so this is someone who will be thinking about things that aren't particularly happy. That isn't a happy thought process astrological signature. Jupiter's in Virgo retrograde. Mars is in Aries 29 degrees. So Mars is happy in Aries. Venus is in Pisces and Uranus is in Pisces. And they've got a mostly one-sided chart, with Jupiter being directly opposite to Venus. Now, because I don't know the time of birth, I don't know the ascendant and stuff, I can't conjecture, but the moon is directly opposition to Pluto. So moon's 25 degrees Gemini and Pluto is 21 degrees Sagittarius. So the moon represents mother, and then Pluto in opposition. So we've got Sun conjunct Neptune, those are outer planetary things, and then we've got moon opposition to Pluto. So already now the moon is the mother, and Pluto's deep change and transformation. Lived with mummy and daddy, mummy became disabled in some way, parents split up, mummy became disabled in some way, lived with mummy for a long amount of time, quite a few years, and mummy was disabled, so the child became a carer for the mother. So moon Pluto opposition, that's, this is how I feel, and Pluto's a really sort of strong energy planet. So there's a mutable cross in the chart. Okay, so we've got a lot of changeability. So the mutable planets in the chart are Pluto, Jupiter, the moon, Venus and Uranus. So there's a number of mutable things. So if we're working with a client that has this and they're talking about suicide, for instance, pinning them down to when it might or might not happen ain't going to happen, because they are going to change their minds. And in the inquest, there was a lot of people reporting that this particular child was up and down. There's nothing in the chart that would indicate up and down as being good or bad, and you can't make a diagnosis for someone's chart to whether or not they get ADHD. It doesn't happen. What you can make a diagnosis of is there a lot of changeability within the person? Yes, there is, because there's a hell of a lot of mutables going on. But the sun is in a fixed sign. So the fixed planets are the Sun and Neptune, and that's it. There's nothing else in the chart that's fixed. So for a fixed sign person to have all of this mutability going on for them, plus they've got Sun conjunct Neptune, that's hard to be living in a world that's constantly changing when the Sun wants some stability, and this poor child didn't have any. So there was no one that they could trust for any vast length of time. As far as I know, I've only read the inquest. Now, the date that they, we do have the date and a possible time for when they ended their life, but I just want to read to you what led up to it. So this is me now quoting from the inquest report itself. So the child lived in the UK and had what's called a CAMHS review, CAMHS, which I presume, and I'm not even going to Google it, that it's some sort of mental health thing that they were. There was a team of people that were, in inverted commas, assisting this particular person. So it says here that the child was in a good place at the time of her CAMHS review in June 21. Over the following months, she was up and down. This is a quote now, so this is a person that was interviewed, saying, up and down many times. This was a tough time as we were trying to set her up, her further education at blah 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 college. She was on and off with her boyfriend at the time. Her mental state was up and down. I had not noticed any suicidal intentions, but was aware that her mental health was not at its best. Her mother said that the relationship with her daughter improved over the summer 21, and they met up and spent some time together. She said that towards the end of the holidays, she was aware that the child's anxieties began to build in anticipation at starting at the college. And the police officer said that following her death, her mobile telephone was examined and a message was found which stated, If I'm gone, open the Snapchat messages with myself and find out why. The messages found included several messages which were composed and saved on the 7th and 14th of July 21 but were not sent. These messages, which clearly gave a picture of the child's state of mind on those dates, included the following statements. Who am I kidding? I should just end it all. No matter who I get close to, they end up hurt or dead. And if I'm not allowed to end it normally, I will do it how it works. Starve myself or jump in front of something, maybe off of something. I can't just keep hurting people like this. It's killing me. Every time something F's up, it's like I'm being stabbed. I don't know how much longer I can keep going or how I am now. I'll be forgotten and gone within a week. Every time I try to be happy, I end up worse, before or after, dragging other people down with me, and it's not fair on them. I should just end it. No one will care or cry. I don't know why I haven't succeeded before, but next time I try, I promise I won't fail. So they've already made a promise to themselves that they won't fail. It's very, very nerve-wracking to kill yourself. It takes an awful lot of, I don't know what the right word is. Courage is a strange word to use, but it's not an easy decision to make. And if people aren't in an inebriated state, and they're doing it in the cold light of consciousness, it does take a certain amount of bravery, is that the right word, to be able to do it, because it's just leading up to it. It can be very scary for the person concerned. So the date that it happened was the 12th of October 21. So I've shared the chart on the show notes. And we'll see that the moon is in Capricorn. And this person was born with Mercury in Capricorn and Chiron in Capricorn. And when they were born, Pluto was in the sign of Sagittarius, 21 degrees. When they passed, Pluto was 24 degrees Capricorn, just past their Mercury. So leading up to them even contemplating the suicide, because they had discussed it. I mean, they've put these Snapchat messages on their phone. Pluto was transiting past their Chiron and their Mercury. So then we have the astrological question. What would you do if this was your client now? So they're born in 2004. They're not teeny weeny, eeny squeeny. I mean, they're a reasonable age. If they came to you and they said this, and you saw that transit, what would you say to them? How would you console them about what's going on for them at the moment? Yeah. Remembering, of course, that there are fixed signs. Fixed signs want to feel better right now. Mutable signs want whatever happened to them to be better. And cardinal signs want to focus on tomorrow. So these are important considerations for a client that might be with you. I mean, going back to the people that I've referred to, I know how to listen. Actually, it's not a lot of talking that you do in these cases, but I know how to listen to the particular client I was referring to earlier, and also keeping into account what sign of the zodiac and what quality or modality their sun sign is, but also keep into account their moon sign and their Mercury. Those three things need to be, you can take the ascendant into account, of course, as well, but we're looking at a chart here where we don't know this. Mercury in Capricorn. Pluto's now been conjunct in it, might have been retrograded that year, I haven't checked. It probably has been going backwards and forwards all over their Mercury. They were dating somebody at the point when this happened, and just prior, I think it was actually on the day that they died, they'd split up with their partner. So that in and of itself is a crusher. So if you're working with a client, directly working with a client that has had something very recently happen with them that is tragic for them, then again, that's something that needs to be helped. They need to be helped with that. And so there you are, you're an astrologer. What can you do what things can you seriously do as an astrologer in a situation like this? Well, obviously, you're not medically qualified. You can't offer too much in the way of advice. But what you can offer someone that comes in a state of anxiety is that you can offer them hope that tomorrow might be a teeny bit better than today, taking into account the modalities of their sun sign, moon sign, Mercury sign, etc. Now, obviously, you can't promise anything. You can't sort of say, oh, yes, everything's going to be cushy in a couple of weeks' time. But were that somebody that I was working with, I would obviously be pointing out that, you know, since I've been born, Pluto has been transiting since 2008 all the way through the sign of Capricorn. And as Pluto nears to a significant point in the chart, and this is the first time that Pluto's conjuncted anything for this particular person, because it was in Sagittarius and they're born, it's gone all the way through the sign of Capricorn, it's now getting near to their Mercury. They would have spent the rest of their lives being under the influence, so to speak, of Capricorn, because they've got Mercury and Chiron and Capricorn, they've got Sun, Neptune in Aquarius, they've got Uranus, Venus in Pisces. So Pluto would have transited through all of those parts of their chart continuously for the rest of their life. Not that Pluto's a ruling planet to their chart, but if they could understand a little bit about what Pluto's all about, deep change and transformation. And anybody that's got Moon in Gemini does need to be able to talk about things. And yes, Moon in Gemini people can be very up and down. There's no two ways about that. But always offer a client some realistic hope that Pluto won't be on Mercury forever. There will be a gap of a few years before it comes towards the sun sign. Having felt the way you feel at the moment with Pluto on your Mercury, what might you want to do when Pluto conjuncts your sun sign? Because their other outer planets will be going forwards through the zodiac. So they've got Neptune in Aquarius. Neptune's never in their lifetime going to reconjunct to their sun sign. Uranus will return when they're 84. It'll be in opposition when they're 40 something. But Uranus won't go back to the sign of Aquarius until they're much later in life. So if they can hold themselves together or find the benefits of Pluto in some way, maybe they wouldn't feel as bad as they feel at the moment. It's an incredibly sad situation for everyone involved left behind. The parents were left behind, the friends were left behind. The grandmother, unfortunately, found this particular child in the house. They'd because they'd finished with the boyfriend the day before, which was the 11th. They killed themselves on the 12th. They'd text the boyfriend to ask them how they felt at I think it was something like 1:50. I won't read the whole thing because it's too sad, but sort of just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they texted them and asked them how they were, and they said that they were managing, because they just said just was the question, are you managing? They said just. And then the grandmother discovered the child at 4:30, so between 1:59, which is like 2 o'clock, and 4:30, they hung themselves in their bedroom. And it was the grandmother, unfortunately, that found them, because people were trying to contact them. And I think more than anything, if somebody is suicidal, it's better that they're not on their own for any vast length of time. I mean, if you're in a mental hospital or a ward or whatever, the staff are supposed to check on you every X amount of hours. The same goes if you're in prison. They don't like people killing themselves in prison because they're not serving their terms. But for inverted normal people, The mother had gone to work. The mother needed to work and had left the child at home. But they were on their own, having spent the night before with the boyfriend and the relationship had ended. So if you are working with someone that is suicidally inclined, one of the other questions is like, how can we make you safe now? Who can you be with? Who can you stay with that can keep a bit of an eye on you until you feel a bit better? Because the emphasis is to always assist life as opposed to keep too much emphasis on what they want to do. So there's things called safety guards. So if they've planned a suicide, how can it be disabled safely? If they've got alcohol, drug or medication concerns, what is needed for safe or no use? If they've had prior suicide behaviour, what have you learned that might help you keep safe for now? If they've got mental health concerns, and this young lady did have ADHD and ASD, I think it is. So mental health concerns, what have you learned that might help you keep safe for now? So safety aids where possible, important situational changes. What strengths do they have? What could they use now to help themselves? And what support is needed? So what or who is available, and what's available and what's acceptable for them. So these things can be discussed with the client to make them safe for now. Because the thing about suicide assistance, to assist them to continue to live, is what do we need to do to keep you safe for now? Just for now, because that's all they can think about is the now, until maybe they have a really, really good night's rest and they feel better tomorrow, or maybe in talking and sharing how they feel in a little time's week's time, they might feel better. So the other transit that's happening with the child, the sun has now Saturn has now transited. So the 12th of October 2021 was when they passed. Saturn is now 6 degrees and their sun is 12 degrees. So Saturn's coming nearer to their sun sign. It's with an orb, but it's not exactly there. In anybody that's under a Saturn transit isn't going to feel fluffy. Jupiter has been transiting through the sign of Aquarius, so this would have assisted. But at the particular day that they died, Jupiter was retrograde. 22 degrees Aquarius, so it had already gone past their sun sign, but now it was retrograding. Transiting Neptune is now exactly conjunct their natal Venus, so transiting Neptune is 21 degrees Pisces and their natal Venus was 22. And don't forget, they were born with Sun and Neptune conjunct, and now Neptune's conjunct to their Venus, and Venus is the love planet, and their relationship has just ended. So, they want a bit of hope. Transiting Chiron is in Aries. It's nowhere near the Mars. Transiting Uranus is conjunct the North Node, but since I don't know the time of day, the North Node will still be that degree. And what else have I got? Venus transiting, it's Saggy, but it's only 4 degrees, and Pluto's 21. And then the Sun, Mars and Mercury's retrograde on the day that they die in Libra, opposition to their natal Mars. And Mars is about action, aggression and energy. So the Mars in Aries, that's the planet that they probably would have used on the day that they died. Mars is square to natal Mercury, I think. Yes. So this particular case is extremely sad, and I hope you've benefited a teeny bit that I've shared this with you. This person is real and they did exist, but as I'm not giving details because I haven't asked permission, but their information is available. So do check out about Living Works. They're the organisation that does the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training courses. Think about how you would work with a client that felt like that. Obviously, if a client does mention these things, I hope you keep notes when you're working with clients. I hope you keep some notes. I keep notes, but that's only because I'm a homeopath. But you make a note that they'd said this to you and what you had advised. And the advice, obviously, is to ring any organisation like the Samaritans, or depending on where you're located, if there's a local group. And these are things that you need to have sort of somewhere on your hard drive. I keep a list of charities. In the UK, we have a lot of charities. I don't even know what the numbers are, but it's a vast amount of charities in the UK. And charities exist to help. So if you were to have a client that has whatever the problem is, in the UK, there'll be a charity that will help. Trust me. There's that amount of charities in the UK. In America, you call them non-profits. But again, there's a considerable amount in America as well. But in the UK, keep a list of your local charities, keep a list of national charities, recommend to the person, the client, that they could possibly contact these charities. But what tends to happen, what happened with this particular child, is that so many people were involved in their care. There was the Child Adolescent Mental Health Services organisation, which I think is the CAMSI thing that I mentioned earlier. Their GP was involved, there was a social worker involved, the parents were continually trying to address things. They'd been admitted to hospital more than once, there'd been the crash team had helped. So many different organisations were, inverted commas, helping, but none of them were communicating with each other. So this is a classic example of somebody in a really bad space and they're not being helped. The organisations that are supposed to help them haven't helped them. And the final comments by the coroner were that this was a case of suicide, that they had talked about it and they unfortunately were let down by the organisations that were supposed to look after them, because the 3 or 4 different organisations that existed weren't talking to each other, were not communicating, and nobody put a plan in place to be able to help her. And on the day that she died, her mother had rung the GP saying that she'd split up with her boyfriend and she wasn't feeling well, and could the GP ring, and the GP didn't have the number, had the wrong number. So it was an awful series of avoidable tragic happenings, because even when somebody is feeling that bad, they don't actually want to die, they want their suffering to end. So working with them to help them feel safe for just that small amount of time that you might be with them, and discussing it with them openly. And never ever say or think, if somebody talks about suicide, oh, they don't mean it, it's just a cry for help. That is absolute la. That's not the, when somebody talks about suicide, somewhere in their consciousness, they're contemplating doing it. So you need to take it really, really seriously, were a client or even a member of your own family to say that. But it's not your job as an astrologer to prevent a suicide. It's your job as an astrologer to talk with a client about the transits that will eventually pass, and how they feel at the moment might feel better, and explain to them the time limits of it and what is it that you could possibly do to help yourself feel better during this period of time when these transits, like with this particular child, it was a Pluto, Saturn, Neptune thing, how long will those things go on for? And then if you can't find a solution with that, talk about the moon or Mercury, this is going to go into this sign, it will be working through this part of your chart. You need to be able to offer a client some hope, because that's what they want. Nobody goes to have a reading and wants to come out feeling worse than when they went in. So I'm a firm believer that offering a client some hope, some joy that is possible at some point for them. And you have the secrets to their psyche. You have their chart in front of you. You know so much about how they operate. And so being able to speak with someone and hear their story and know that you understand not them, but you understand their astrology. So therefore you'll know where their strengths and weaknesses are. Look for their trines, look for their sextiles. Don't go on about the oppositions. This particular person had the Grand Cross in mutables, not helpful. But look to the sextiles, look to the trines. Oh, these are the positive things in your chart. What can we do to help you feel better about that? I mean, they had a lovely sextile between the Moon and Mars. Moon 25 degrees Gemini, Mars 29 degrees Aries. Something physical, maybe go for a walk somewhere. Could you join a group? It's a lot to ask somebody when they're in really bad space, but you can point out for somebody, not keep hankering and harbouring about the negatives in the chart. Oh, you got this Grand Cross, it's so negative. Always, and this is Adrian Duncan, I firmly believe his advice was so helpful, go for the sextiles and the trines and big them up for the person. This is where your strengths are. These are the things that will help you, yeah? I mean, sometimes squares can be classified as helpful because if they manage to get to where they are now with their squares and they're sort of used to them, use those as well. But the sextiles and trines are the things that are easy for them. They don't realise that they're easy for them, but you can utilise those, yeah? So today we've been talking about suicide. There are some links on the show notes for organisations and about the statistics of it. It's a horrible thing that the numbers are rising and that mental health is such a consideration at the moment, that people don't feel safe or happy or content for obviously lots and lots of different reasons. But your training in astrology will help people. Yeah, understanding astrology is there to help others, yeah. Not to make life worse for them, but to help them. I hope you never have to have a client that has these problems, but it's useful to have a set somewhere on your hard drive of organisations that can help, suggestions. Do the training if you're up for it. Always, if you're going to be an astrologer working one-on-one with clients, do counselling skills diploma. Okay, it's going to take you a year to do it. You can't do it overnight. It's a 1-year study. Counselling skills. That's not being a counsellor. That's just knowing how to talk with people, listen to clients and be understanding. And that will strengthen your astrological practice. So I hope you have a fab week, and I'll be back next week. We've got our first guest that will be there soon, who's going to be doing some teaching. So that's going to happen in the next episode. So I hope you have a fab week, and I'll be back next week. Bye-bye now.